Gunnery Sergeant Travis Keen's voice carried down range 7 like gravel poured from a steel bucket. "What is that thing on your wrist, candidate? A backstage pass. On my line, we wear dog tags, not souvenirs." Laughter rippled along the shooter's berm, the kind of polite chuckle young Marines produce when a senior NCO wants company. The target of the joke didn't bite. Elena Drake, small for the uniform sleeves, neat boots, clean, kept her cheek on the stock, and her eye on the mirage that shimmered above 1,000 yards of baked dirt. The black silicone band on her wrist might as well have been a wedding ring for all the attention she gave it. Up in the tower, Colonel Aaron Whitaker lowered his binoculars and studied the end position instead of the scoreboard. He'd come out for an hour to watch the advanced marksmanship class, good for morale, good for his own battered sense of the basics. But what snagged him wasn't a dramatic string of hits or a standout muzzle discipline. It was the way Elena Drake stood when she wasn't standing at all, bone stacked over bone shoulders, loose chin, level weight, settled in a way that let the earth carry most of her. You didn't teach that so much as uncover it. A long time ago, in a place that still didn't have a name, Whitaker had seen that stillness among a handful of people who moved like water and looked like nobody. Their quiet had saved lives that loudness would have cost. He felt the old prickle between the shoulder blades. Pay attention. Keen paced in front of the line boots, chewing gravel, barrel-chested and fearless, in the way of men who love a range more than a meeting. This is advanced work, candidates. That means the little things are big. That means gear squared away, eyes forward, no fashion statements. He halted at Drake's firing point and hooked a thumb at her wristband, turning his head so the rest of the line could enjoy the show. "You think the rules don't apply to you? You think you're here to fill a quota?" A few shoulders shook with laughter. Drake's didn't. She ran a fingertip along the M110A1's bolt carrier, then laid the rifle back into its rest, as if it were a sleeping dog. What Whitaker watched wasn't defiance. It was economy. No spare motion when the rifle moved, no wasted glance when she checked her bubble level, no stiffness anywhere that suggested she was playing a part. The silicone band. He'd seen something like it once plain on purpose, sealed tight, sometimes carrying an RFID tag. Only a certain kind of reader would notice. He hadn't seen one in years. That didn't mean they were gone. Keen wanted a teachable moment and thought he'd found one. "Fine," he said, jabbing a finger at the far berm where a steel silhouette waited under a sliver of heat haze. "Let's end the debate. Final qual, one shot, cold bore, 1,200 yards. We've got a left-to-right boil at the 100, a right-to-left river at the 9, and a quartering headwind. Nobody's guessing right. No one's hit this plate all week." He turned to the class. "Watch closely. Sometimes the lesson is what not to do." Drake eased into position. She didn't ask for a ballistic app or a second wind flag. She did what old hands do, breathed once and watched the world answer. Heat shimmer lifted in slow waves. A tuft of grass near 900 yards leaned, settled, leaned again. A thin track of dust along an invisible line drifted, paused, reversed. She read it the way a fisherman reads water or a farmer reads sky. The range fell into a particular quiet, the good kind, not the embarrassed kind, where even the gravel seemed to hold its breath. Keen tablet in hand, tapped the big screen to bring up a live view of the head and shoulders target. "Any time today," he said and smiled for the class. Drake's left hand found the rear bag and squeezed a quarter-thick correction into the stock. Her right index finger took up slack until the blade kissed the wall. Her cheek pressure didn't change. Her breath didn't hitch. She felt the rifle find her bones and let the bones find the ground. The M110A1 cracked once the report rolling back across the range, like thunder splitting off a canyon wall. Through the scope, the world wobbled and returned. On the big screen, nothing moved for a heartbeat. Then a neat black hole appeared in the center of the silhouette's forehead. No splash, no favoring edge, no mercy. A dead center, dead calm, impossible shot. The line gasped. One candidate laughed in shock and then clapped a hand over her mouth, as if noise might pull the hole back out of the steel. Keen's jaw tightened. He tapped the tablet as if the angle might offer a different answer. "No way," he said to nobody. "That's not—" He didn't finish. Drake ran the bolt with emotion so honest it was almost modest, then lifted her head, locked the bolt to the rear, and set the rifle on safe. She slid a brass catcher onto the bench, gathered her loose brass, and stood. If she'd been a stage performer, she might have bowed. She wasn't. She was a shooter who had done a shooter's job. Whitaker descended the tower stairs without taking his eyes off the end of the line. He'd seen luck before, and this wasn't it. Cold bore at 12 with a switching crosswind and a perfect head hit. That was a shot you took. If it wasn't the first you'd made that week or that year, it was the shot you made because it was the next one on a long road of practice that no audience had ever seen. He cut through the ripple of murmurs and stopped beside Keene, who watched Drake the way a mechanic watches an engine after a sound he can't explain. Gunny Whitaker said low enough to carry only to the right ears, "Pull her file." He nodded toward the plain black wristband. "Run it on the secure reader." Keene's frown was part confusion, part defensiveness. He was a good instructor with a bad habit, assuming that loudness proved leadership. He tapped at his tablet, fumbled, and then flinched when a small blue icon lit along the edge of the screen, a proximity alert he had never seen. An authorization request scrolled across a gray pane, additional credentials required. Whitaker keyed in a code he didn't use in public and let the tablet churn. When the document unfurled, most of it was midnight black. The white that remained was enough. Drake Elena R. MSGT, U.S. Army, Unit Joint Special Operations Command Tier-1, Designation Obsidian, Decorations, redacted, Silver Star, Bronze Star, WV, redacted. Qualifications, Long-Range Precision, Advanced Targeting, Behavioral Assessment. Assignment, redacted. Purpose of visit, recertification, Facility Evaluation. Whitaker closed the file like a book you don't leave lying around. He looked down the line past young men and women who would spend their 20s being told to be tougher, louder, harder, and raise both hands when asked who wanted more. Then he looked at Elena Drake, who wore none of that and carried all of it. He stepped forward until he stood in front of her position. She faced him without a glance at the crowd behind him. For a moment he saw her the way he'd seen others once, as an answer instead of a question. "Master Sergeant Drake," he said, voice plain and measured, "thank you for your work." He didn't snap to attention, didn't stage a parade, didn't do anything that would make the respect about him. The words were correction enough, not candidate, not miss, not you there. Master Sergeant. Named and known. Keene swallowed. The class watched him as much as they watched her. He put his tablet against his thigh as if it weighed too much to hold at chest height. "Ma'am," he said, and found that the rank he wore didn't interfere with humility. My remarks were out of line. I misread what I was seeing." He had more to say than didn't. He was wise enough to let her decide how much she wanted to receive. Drake didn't rescue him from the pause and didn't punish him with it. "It's a range," she said, tone even. "Ranges are loud. Outcomes should be quiet." She glanced past him toward the headplate 2/3 of a mile away. "The wind out there talks if you let it. You'll hear the same words if you breathe through your feet and stop listening to your pulse." A few candidates smiled, one because the phrase sounded odd, others because they tried it and felt their shoulders loosen and their scopes settle. Keene nodded. He'd used different words for years and hadn't said it better once. Whitaker took a step back and let the scene reset itself. He didn't need to pronounce a moral. The range had done that already. They took the headplate down that afternoon and replaced it with a fresh one. The shot didn't need to be proven again. They scrubbed Drake's name off the paperwork and hung the plate in the briefing hall without a caption. Marines aren't sentimental about steel. They respect what it reports. By evening, the headplate had a nickname anyway. No ceremony, no committee, just the thing people called it when they pointed Drake's line. The next morning, Keene didn't start with an insult. He started with a minute of silence on the firing line and a plain instruction errand through the nose down through the feet. Let your jaw go slack. If you can't hear the grass, don't touch the trigger. He set a black wristband on the lectern, not like a trophy, but like a tool. Don't mistake quiet for insignificant, he said. It just means the work is happening where you can't see it. When the rifles came up, his critique shifted. He stopped teasing height or weight and started hunting the mechanics that always tell the truth. Stop muscling the sling, let the bones carry it. Your natural point of aim is 3 inches left. Don't force it, move your hips. Mirage on the right is running like a river, call it before you dial. He didn't ask for volume. He demanded sequence. Build the house, then live in it. No steps skipped, none repeated out of nervousness. The class breathed together. They missed less. When they didn't chase and therefore missed less again. Word about the shot did what stories do on a base. It pried open doors it had no business opening and passed under others as a whisper. It reached the chow hall by coffee, the motor pool by lunch, and the S3 shop by afternoon. The older NCOs wore their skepticism like a comfortable shirt until they heard who had seen it and what the steel said. Then they did what older NCOs do when proof is irrefutable. They adjusted without theater. Whitaker's role in the tale shrank to a crease in the memory, just a colonel who said the right name at the right time. Keen's part grew and changed. He showed up in the briefing hall after chow and stood beneath the unmarked plate and told new classes. The only piece they needed, steel doesn't care about your story. It tells its own. If you want a say in it, control your breath and your bones before you ask it for a favor. As for Elena Drake, she did what people like her do. She disappeared. The last many saw of her was a tan SUV sliding through the main gate windows, up wristband under a sleeve. Someone said she was bound for another schoolhouse, another evaluation, another place where a small correction at the quiet edge of a problem would save a stack of hours and maybe a life. There were rumors, there are always rumors, that she had built a curriculum with other names like Obsidian and Seraph and Nyx. That she'd once put a team on target by reading wind off a rooftop when UAV feeds were down. None of it was written down where a lance corporal could read it. All of it was beside the point. What mattered at range 7 was the hole in the steel and the way the line sounded different afterward. In the weeks that followed, Whitaker spent more time outside and less behind his desk. He didn't need to micromanage a change that was making itself. He could hear it when he opened his office door, and the wind carried the range to him. Fewer barked corrections, more lines of simple instruction, longer pockets of quiet. On corners of the base where bravado had lived like an unpinned grenade, behavior had moved in steady, useful, unfancy. He came down to a Wednesday morning block and watched Keen run a lesson that would have been laughed out of the room 2 months earlier. No PowerPoint, no sexy footage. A patch of dirt, a mirage reading 101, done with nothing but eyes and patience. Keen stood behind a candidate and pointed to a flag at 50 yards to grass, at 100 to the shimmer at the 400 mark. Flags lie, he said. Grass lies less. Mirage doesn't lie at all. It tells you what the air's actually doing on the line that matters. The candidate nodded. Say the direction out loud. Left to right, she said. Now the speed, slow river, good. What's your hold? The numbers came clean and humble. A month earlier, the same Marine would have added volume and shaved seconds. Now he added a breath and shaved wind. Drake's line acquired little rituals. Candidates gave it a glance before they took their first cold bore of the day, not to pray, but to calibrate. Instructors kept the wristband on the lectern where everyone could see it. When a new class asked whose it was, Keen shrugged. Doesn't matter. You'll never meet the person you need it to remind you of. And when a cocky corporal tried to recreate the old tone with a jibe about a candidate's size, Keen laid a hand on the lectern and said, hands, posture, breath, wind, those are the 4. The rest is noise. We're done with noise. Results are a poor way to tell a true story, but even the skeptics noticed. First round hits increased. The ugly flyers that screamed hips and hurry dropped away. Less time was spent arguing dope. More was spent building the position so dope could be trusted. When someone missed badly, instructors didn't reach for volume. They asked for a rerun of the sequence. Where were your bones? What did your breath do? What did the mirage say? Where was your trigger when the world moved? Do it again with those answers in order, and the hole appeared where it was asked to. One afternoon, Whitaker walked through the hall at shift change and found Keen alone beneath Drake's plate, cleaning the glass on the frame with the hem of his t-shirt. You used to like the show, Whitaker said, not unkind. I liked being right, Keen answered, not looking up. Loud felt right until Steele told me otherwise. He finished his task and turned. You ever meet someone you can't explain to people who haven't met them? Whitaker smiled. Once or twice. She was one of those, Keen said. She took the air out of the room without taking a breath. He put the rag in his pocket and added, You think that wristband meant something? It meant we had the right student and the wrong assumption, Whitaker said. It meant we got to fix something without breaking a soul to do it. A month after the shot, Range 7 added a 1-page insert to the training packet. No initials on the bottom, no classified tags, Nothing for anyone to salivate over, just a quiet block titled First Round Discipline. It taught a 3-count scan, hands, hips, horizon, and a 2-line breathing drill, in through the nose, down through the feet. It ended with a sentence that sounded like it had been living on the range for years. Outcome is quiet. Make yours. A visiting inspector asked Whitaker where the new material had come from. Out there, Whitaker said, nodding toward the berm. Not from the G3, no. From a contractor, num. From who then? Whitaker considered the safest answer. From a single hole in a piece of steel, he said, and shook the man's hand before the conversation could go in a direction they both would regret. That winter, a storm walked down the coast and smothered the base in cold wind that scattered flags and made paper targets into kites. Keene put the line under cover, lit a space heater, and gave the class a lecture no one would have enjoyed in July. He held up the wristband and set it on the bench as if setting down a weight. This doesn't belong to you, he said, but the lesson does. A quiet professional walked through this place and set a standard without a speech. We're going to keep it without one. He had them read Mirage off a rain slick, taught them to see the boil that tells you there's no wind at all, the river that carries you away if you try to stand still on it. He drew the rough anatomy of a trigger pull on a butcher paper pad and wrote 4 words beneath it: breathe, build, believe, break, out. On the berm, water pooled in small rivers. In the hall beneath the head plate, a yellow light threw a warm square across the floor. The base felt older and steadier than it had the week before. After the cycle turned and new faces replaced, old Keene noticed something else he hadn't expected. The smallest Marines on the line started teaching the biggest how to make less noise. A lance corporal who could have hid behind a rucksack showed a former lineman how to settle his shoulders without hunching them. A corporal with a voice like a foghorn learned to whisper to himself the way some people pray. Keene let them teach. Nobody needed his endorsement to be right. Finally, on a bright Friday, when the wind behaved and the world looked easier than it usually is, Whitaker walked the length of the line and stopped at the end position. He looked out across the miles of sky and scrub and said mostly to himself, "The hardest part of command is knowing when to shut up and let the right example do the work." Keene heard him and chuckled. "Sir, if we could write that into doctrine, we'd save a lot of chalk." "We just did," Whitaker said and tapped the plate with a knuckle. "It's right there. No one carved a speech into the wall. No one hyperlinked a video. The story settled where good stories belong, into the quiet habits of people who had to do hard things well. If a new instructor asked about Drake, he got a shrug and a nudge toward the range. If a young Marine asked about the wristband, she heard, "Don't worry about it. Worry about your bones." If anyone asked for a moral, the answer was the same one. Whitaker gave himself when the day was long and the inbox would not empty. Respect is earned by composure and results under pressure, not by rank, volume, or appearance. Everything else is wind. And somewhere far from Range 7, Elena Drake, Master Sergeant designation Obsidian, did what quiet professionals do. She kept moving. The only proof that she'd come through at all was a small black circle on an old piece of steel, a change in the way a place sounded when people worked, and the way a few more Marines breathed through their feet before they asked the world for a perfect shot.